Welcome to the Wild Conversation, where human being and human doing converge, reshaping the world of leadership, culture, and performance. Today, we get to have a wild conversation with Jamie Crosbie. Jamie is a global keynote speaker, author, and leadership strategist known for helping teams unlock elite performance through clarity, accountability, and emotional intelligence. Her clients describe her as a force for clarity in chaos, someone who brings both challenge and transformation. With a background in leading high growth sales teams, Jamie's work lives at the intersection of revenue and resilience. She trains leaders around the world to drive results without losing the human element and to lead with both courage and conviction. She's bold, unfiltered, and trusted by organizations that are serious about performance and even more serious about people. Jamie, welcome to the Wild Conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
We're excited about this conversation. And before we jump into it, we're going to play a quick round of wild cards, something we love to do with each of our guests. We have a deck of 52 cards. I just pulled 10. So we'll just pick a number between 1 and 10. And we'll each answer a different question. Just answer from your gut. You could answer it in like one sentence, or if a story comes to mind, feel welcome to tell it. I'll go first, and then Jamie, you can go next, and Rob will round us out. I am going to choose number 3. It is, who are you investing in? Ooh, I love this question. On a daily basis, it is my husband and my kids and the leaders I get to work with at Wild. Most recently, I just got back from an incredible trip to Palau where I got to invest in a group of about 60 managers and HR leaders, unplanned, but very fun and intentional.
That is great. That is great. I love this that we're playing a game. Okay. I'm going to choose number 7, my favorite number.
All right. Number 7. Are you more focused on urgency or patience today?
Well, today, I'm traveling today, so I do have some urgent deadlines to make it on the plane for a speaking engagement. But I would say, in general, patience, because it doesn't come as naturally to me as urgency.
It's good.
Awesome. I'll go number 10.
All right, number 10. What is the conversation you wish someone would have with you that you could have with someone else?
What's something exciting that's happening for you today? I think that's the question to start that conversation that I will now go have with someone else.
Awesome.
Thank you, Sab.
Love it.
Jamie, it's so good to have you as a part of the Wild Conversation podcast. It's really exciting. And I know you and I got to know each other a little bit a few weeks ago. And so this is awesome. I want to start off so something Sabeth said, by the way, when she was reading your bio, I was like, there are pieces of that bio that sound like we were like separated at birth. There's a like courage and conviction. If you had asked clients or even students of mine, because I was a professor for many years, like what's a word that defines me, and they would have said conviction. They would always bring that up. And but I was curious about this one statement where people have said about you, like as a speaker, as a leader, that you are a force for clarity in chaos. And what I'm curious about on the personal side of that, like what is it about you that causes people to describe their experience with you that way? I'm just curious about that. Like I love that clarity and chaos. So what is it about you?
I would say one of the things I base my life on and encourage others to do, and I see it as my purpose, is to help others live fully on purpose with capital P purpose, greater purpose. So living with intention. And I think that is probably where the clarity piece comes in. We all have chaos, but the clarity piece comes in aligning what they're doing in their lives with their bigger purpose every day, right?
Yeah.
And so defining what that means, their goals, the what, the why, the how, and also what I believe strongly in is the mindset behind it, so that that can actually happen and come to fruition in their lives.
That's awesome. Now, it's okay. So can I get personal for a second? Because it's funny, like I said, I think some people might describe me in a similar way, at least parts of that. But is that just what your clients would say, or would your friends and family say the same thing?
My friends and family would probably say that even more so. And
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
and when you said conviction, it made me think of a friend of mine once said, "You have a really strong constitution." That always stuck with me because I thought, I mean, I really, I'm glad. And I think that's a compliment, just knowing what you stand for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. Thank you for that.
That's so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
We're going to dive in, Jamie, to the State of Trust at Work report.
Yeah.
And curious, what is something in the State of Trust at Work report that surprised you or affirm what you've seen in the field? And maybe we can start at the intersection. You've coached performance cultures across industries. What stood out to you in the data, and how does that connect to what you're seeing on the ground right now?
I would say that the report really affirmed what I've seen time and time again, that people don't leave jobs, they leave trust gaps.
Mm,
And
mm,
Mm,
oftentimes we don't know why people are really leaving because they don't tell us the truth. But it's about relationships and trust gaps. And I would say what surprised me was just how deeply lack of trust impacts not only performance, but really also retention and well being.
mm,
In terms of my work, I've always said that mindset drives behavior. But when trust is missing, even the strongest mindset has to push through fear just to show up. And so it takes a toll. We know that. And what affirmed my work the most is just that high performance is impossible when people don't feel psychologically safe. And
mm,
that's not just fluff. Some people think it's just fluff, but it's truly strategy behind
mm.
success.
Yeah. I mountain bike with some friends most Monday nights. We picked up a straggler a couple weeks ago. This guy was on the trail and we started talking to him. And so then he got our numbers. And so he came last night. And so I don't know him very well. And
Right.
at one point we paused, so we need a break. And he said, so we're in the woods, and he said, so what do you do when you're not mountain biking? And so I described, our business and the work we do around trust and developing leaders. Um, and it was interesting how quickly he could go there because he works in a tech firm. And he said,
Right.
I worked on a team where trust was so high. You know what I mean? Like and he basically was saying something that's this fundamental truth that he said, we knew each other so well.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
we really had transparency on,
Authentically knew each other.
yeah. And it wasn't like we knew the ins and outs. We knew, and he said, now I've moved teams just 2 weeks ago.
mm,
And he said, and he started to describe what we described in the report around, this where there's so many unknowns that you're forced to make decisions and even take action based on assumptions. Like we
Mm-hmm.
would describe like you're functioning in the dark, basically.
Right.
You don't know each other well. You just made me think about that. So I'm like, my new friend last night, it's like, whoa, we had a very interesting conversation. But if it's so interesting, Jamie, because I'm really fascinated by sales cultures. I really am. And so I was so excited to talk with you about this. And I know your work goes far beyond that, but it's such a critical part in organizations. And one of the things that you hear, and I think I experience this too, is that outcomes so often overpower the reality of the human stories behind those achieving those outcomes. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like I have sales leader friends, chief revenue officers and multi-billion-dollar companies who would say, and it's just like it is so driven by those outcomes. And I'm so curious about your perspective on that. And I have a follow-up question, like from a leader I heard once, but what is your perspective on that? Is that a reality where those outcomes just overpower the human story? And even what have you done to kind of integrate those things?
Well, I think, people are looking at outcomes in sales cultures. There's a lot of conversation about the outcomes. And I believe strongly that we're talking a lot about that, which is the what, it's the goal of the whole organization, right? To hit the outcome. But true leadership and true culture is developed when we understand the why behind that for the person. Like we authentically know the person. And yes, they're there for the what, because they need to obviously perform for a reason to keep their job, to perform for the company, to pay their bills, to provide a certain life. But what's their real why behind it? And I think that's the intersection of elevating their performance and
Mm.
developing a culture that goes so far beyond just the outcome, where you're still celebrating the outcome and you still have to lead toward it, but there's a bigger conversation behind it,
Mm. Mm.
really understanding the person and their why and why they're really there, why it matters to them personally.
What's the repeated story that you hear from sales or revenue leaders? You know, I mean, you do this work long enough. I know you've heard a story over and over again where you're like, this is what they need to get that they don't quite get yet about what you just described. Like, is there a common story that from people that are those revenue officers where they're like, they're telling a story and you're like, you're not quite getting it yet, but here's what I would love for you to understand.
Yeah, I think it's they're always managing people, not
Uh,
they're managing things, they're not leading people. They're managing outcomes, they're managing numbers, they're, yes, you have to have the performance-based freedom and the accountability and the metrics, but what and who are the people behind that? And
yeah,
that's where I just like I wish they could get that true leadership is helping to change the trajectory of someone's success. If they could be here on their own, you can help them get here. It's not motivating them, it's not, just hounding them about a number. Yes, you have to have that accountability and you have to manage to an outcome, but you can lead people to achieve higher outcomes by caring about the bigger picture and the why.
do you have over and over again people who would say, like, there's a quote I have from a leader that we interacted with where someone who said successful sales is about reading people well for the sake of the sale, because in the end, if the sale doesn't happen, nothing else happens. Like, we have to achieve the outcome. uh,
Right,
I don't know if there's a question in that, but it's something I hear so often. They're like, at the end of the day, it's about reaching those sales quotas, those goals. The pressure is so high.
right. But I'd say, I mean, if someone said that, right,
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
about reading people well for the sake of the sale, I'd say, well, you're not wrong, but you're not all the way right either.
I love that. You're not wrong, but you're not all the right either. That's good.
I mean, it can be an and or a both, but reading people well shouldn't be really just for the sake of the sale. It should be for the sake of service. Because when we read people well, we build long term trust, not
Yeah.
just short term wins. And trust doesn't just get the sale, it gets the long term renewal, it gets the relationship, it gets the referral, it gets the team that stays. So if outcomes are king, then trust is the crown.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. So related to that, something, and I have a two-part question is to connect courage and trust, because you often say that courage is the root of all high performance. And I love that statement. Will you unpack that for us? Like, what do you mean by that statement? Courage is the root of all high performance.
I think we've got to break through our own limiting beliefs, and that takes courage. And that's when we reach new heights. But I think courage and trust are symbiotic, right?
Mm, mm,
Trust is the soil, and courage is the root. And
yeah.
without trust, courage turns into burnout. And without courage, trust becomes complacency. So I think they're very symbiotic.
Building trust in your business starts with being able to measure it so that you can create a pathway for change. Our Wild Trust Index measures the drivers of trust at the personal, team, and organizational levels. We are building the largest database on the drivers of trust inside of organizations. This survey will inform growth imperatives and the necessary organizational change needed to fuel that growth. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.
We rebuild relationships, we rebuild trust if a leader has lost trust through authenticity, transparency, consistency, self-awareness. When a team has trust issues with leadership, it starts with owning it. We can't get through that if we won't own it. So humility builds that bridge back to trust.
So tell me, Jamie, what is it that you mean? Why is courage important to you?
I believe it takes real courage to break through our own barriers and really dig deep into what holds us back from living our best life, from our best success. And oftentimes it's our own limiting beliefs. And courage is extremely connected to looking at that and being willing to break through those limiting beliefs.
Yeah, that is so fascinating because we see that, trust is talked about. Covey describes it as the most important currency in an organization. It's like if you don't have trust, you have nothing.
Yeah.
But what is so often not talked about is the courage part. That it takes courage to even begin to trust ourselves, or to
Yes.
trust each other, or to even be vulnerable enough to tell. One of the things we found, like in our trust research, was that truth telling, like me just speaking honestly with you, is so critical. And honestly means not it's like condemning you. It's like saying, like, I can't do this yet. I don't have the competence or the skill to do this thing yet. But
Yes.
but it takes a lot of courage, right? To be that vulnerable, to enter into that conversation. And we don't talk about it that way that often.
I agree. I agree. We don't often say it takes courage, but really, when I'm looking at developing new employees within my organization, I talk a lot about I want you to be willing to say the truth. I want you to be willing to ask questions. I want you to, don't just agree with everything we say and ask questions when you don't know. And that is all about courage and trust.
It's good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's so good. Jamie, you've built a career in performance cultures, and like you've mentioned, it can be brutal if trust isn't present in that space. What does healthy accountability look like when the stakes are high? And where do you see leaders getting it wrong?
I think when relational clarity is missing, which again comes into the trust factor, but that's when structure becomes a shield or even worse, a sword. So I believe healthy accountability starts with not only shared goals, but more so our shared humanity. And leaders get it wrong. And this relates back to what we were talking about earlier when they're just focused on the metrics. That's just managing things versus leading people. So they often forget the meaning behind the work, right? And that's or they don't understand their team members' bigger purpose or why. So they're only talking about the metrics, the what for the company, but not the why for the person. And I think a high stakes culture without trust is really a fear-based one. But when trust is present, feedback and having the courage to be authentic and give feedback on either side becomes the fuel for high performance instead of the fire. But trust has to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. You just moved right into the next thing I was thinking about in that idea of working with people who live in the metrics. Everything is measured. And we see that trust, while we talk about measuring it, it isn't only a KPI, right? It's a living ecosystem. It's in the relational dynamics of every person on the team, up and down, sideways. But what is your take on how trust is built or lost in that data-driven, sales-heavy environment?
I do think often that high performing environment, they misunderstand what really builds the long term trust. I think many high performers confuse performance output with trust input. And just because we hit our numbers doesn't mean that our clients or our team trusts us, right? So we think we're winning just because we've hit our numbers. We could be far exceeding our numbers if we had trust present, or we could be exceeding them and not have trust present and have a lot of retention issues. But I think trust is really built, to your point, and the question is just, it's how we show up between the sales, in the follow-up, the accountability, the empathy. And data heavy environments, trust is really what I would consider more of the human algorithm. And without it, the numbers might spike, but they won't stick consistently.
Interesting. One of our wild focuses is on what we describe as that line of sight between the individual and the organization. And
Right.
it's so funny. And it's like, this shouldn't be rocket science, because it's probably not. But this reality that leaders fall into, or people in organizations fall into, is as our organizations grow and scale, like scaling systems is absolutely a necessity, just like metrics. Like if we aren't measuring, nothing really happens. We have to be measuring. And at
We
the
have
same
to.
time, you have to, right? But if we over default there, we
Yeah.
lose sight of the one. And so our wild statement is focusing on the one with an eye to the many, is like, but you have to be intentional about that, because some leaders we find in many for-profit businesses, there will be, as they scale, a default toward the metrics or the systems,
Yeah.
and lose the one. Or sometimes in nonprofits we work with, there's almost an over focus to the one, without like this. It's not okay to talk about strategy in a nonprofit. You know what I mean? Like it's so
I
humanized.
totally know what you mean.
And it's the oldest story in research. This is why I was so intrigued, Jamie, by some of the statements you make and the work that you do of connecting performance to humanity. Because one of the oldest things in research around leader development and just organizational functioning is this basic 2x2 between the necessity for task clarity or
Right.
structure and goals, and the necessity for what's often called consideration for people.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it just made me think about that as you were talking through that.
Well, and it's such a balance. It truly is a balance. But I love the way you put it, the default toward the metrics. And that's very natural. That's really
Yeah.
not leadership, though. Leadership
Yeah.
is way beyond that.
So one of the areas that came up in our research was that some of the lowest trust scores they come from leaders feeling alone or unsupported. Like there's a sense of they're alone, and leadership by its very nature, when you step out, is kind of isolating. We've seen that from the research for decades on this. And I'm curious about what you would say to the leader who feels like the culture depends on them, or even the performance depends on them, but they feel like no one's really with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that is so common. I would say, I mean, that was probably one of my early lessons in leadership, and I'm sure you've been there as well, where it can feel like an island. And even when you're in a crowded room, and part of that is people don't tell you the truth. They tell you what you want to hear. You have to really develop that trust to get people to tell you the truth. I think I would say, the first step is name it. Like, just you lose the power of that feeling when you say it out loud, and you can't heal what you hide. But then it's really important to build your own support around you, your own board of support. If you feel like you're in an island within your company, there can be mentors or peers or coaches around. No one reaches their peak alone. We all need that. So we can build. I talk a lot about that with mindset. We have an imprinted mindset that we walk into life with that comes from our parents or caretakers. But then we have a mindset that's imprinted that we get to develop by what we read, what we listen to, what podcasts, mentors, peers, coaches, books. And so I would say to develop that intentionally, to look at, how to build that support, because isolation is one of the biggest mindset traps that leaders fall into. And I think naming it and then building that support is not about weakness, but about strength. It's wisdom.
You made me think that the follow-on to Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset, some of the follow-on research that showed that mindset is a relational factor. In fact, you can change a person or even a child's mindset within about 3 or 4 minutes in a conversation by the way you speak to them. And so the idea that we develop mindset, even in kind of what you were describing, in a vacuum, is just not true. Like we affect each other continually, right?
Yes, and we can choose. And I think this is a lot of people feel like there may be victims in some of their mindset or in limiting beliefs that they have. And within organizations as well, individuals can choose and organizations can choose. The hard part is most organizations spend all their time developing the skill sets of their people. But 80% of success comes from mindset. And so we can, choose to let go of things in our lives that maybe don't serve us, or ideas or things, or like you said, in a conversation, to elevate the mindset, the growth mindset based on how we're communicating, or to build a high performance mindset culture. We can shift that mindset, and really it raises the bar on performance, but it takes intentionally developing people in that area.
Yeah, that's so good. For all of our friends out in the learning and development and leadership development space, we don't mean any offense, but I also think it's interesting to do a little deconstruction. And so my question for us, and I'll give you my two approaches, and I'd love to hear yours, is like, if we threw out the leadership playbook as it exists today and rebuilt it from scratch,
Yeah.
we would need help, right, to do this, right? A lot of
Yeah.
work. We'd need a good battalion of us to do this well. Knowing what we know about trust and courage and performance and the human brain, this question of where we would start, like where would we start if we did that? If we went off road. And I'll give you two ideas just from my
Okay.
perspective. I want to hear yours, Jamie. One
Yeah.
is I'm going to say it with stronger language than I may feel, but I'd start with obliterating our prehistoric approaches to developing leaders. I would
I
focus
think we develop them. I think most of the time we just think it's a high performer and now they can be a leader.
totally. And it's like, and I would focus it on learning, truth telling, and building emotional maturity and
Yeah.
deep competence, and not on whether or not they liked it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's one thing. The second thing I would do is I would also focus on, this is a big one and it requires a whole other conversation we may have later, but on readiness over high potentials. Like focusing on whether people are ready for what's next, as opposed to whether or not they are in the box of being a high potential or not, which is kind of a fixed mindset, by the way, right? So it's like you're either a high potential or you're not.
Yeah.
As opposed to maybe you'll be ready in the future, but you may not be ready now. What would be some obliteration you would do on the current way we do things?
Yeah, it would take a lot of obliteration. One thing that comes to mind is just reframing failure, because failure is a stepping stone to success, right? But there's so many cultures that just look at it as you win, you lose, you failed, you succeeded, versus I just learned and I grew. And this was one step closer to success. I used to ask my kids at the dinner table, and it really surprised them the first time I did it, what did you fail at today? And they looked at me like, the principal called or something. And they said, nothing, I promise. Why? And I said, well, if you guys didn't fail at anything, then you didn't learn anything. So I think we have to reframe that. I think too, just because and a lot of this focuses more on emotional intelligence versus just the intellectual intelligence, but rewarding integrity and trust and effort, not just outcomes, looking at all of it, talking about all of it. And then really, and this goes back to your work, which is amazing, is building trust as a daily behavior, not looking at just metrics and outcomes, but really looking at, do we have wildly authentic, meaningful connection and conversation and authenticity here? Because that is what will build the outcomes. And that takes self-awareness more than strategy. So I guess that would be my final thought, is, focusing on self-awareness more so than just strategy, teaching it, right? Teaching us to be aware and building the cultures of helping people transform performance by changing the way they think. And that's work I'm so passionate about, with talking about high performance mindset and the performance mindset shift.
Jamie, that might be, there's a massive golden nugget in that people, I hope they will hear. And even your statement about your kids, like, I know so many people who are listening are going to take that away and go like, what did you fail at today? And the research on failure is fascinating, because these are not failures that like you can really rosy up. A lot of times these failures are things that I do not want to repeat. So these are not fun things.
No.
It's not making them fun, because you make them fun, it's no longer a failure, right? But it's like to have people be, and it comes back to what you were saying about courage. It takes courage to say, like, I failed at this and I'm going to learn from it. It doesn't mean I want to repeat it.
No,
I'm going to
no,
learn from it. That
don't
is just,
repeat it.
what a nugget. There's going to be so many leaders going around to their businesses now going, so what'd you fail at today?
Yeah.
Super,
What is that
super good.
conversation you wish someone would have with you that you can go have
That's
with
right. That's the
them
question.
now?
That's what I should have said.
Exactly.
So good.
I love it. Oh
Awesome.
my gosh, this
Oh,
conversation is so good.
Yeah.
yeah. What a rich conversation. Jamie, thank you so much for this. We could continue talking for hours. We
Truly.
will not do that. So don't worry if you're listening or watching. We're not going to continue for the next 3 hours. Jamie has a flight to catch, but we do want the people listening and watching to know how they can connect with the work that you're doing. So tell us, what's the best way for those listening and watching to find you and connect?
Certainly on LinkedIn under my name, Jamie Crosbie, and then my website, jamiecrosbie.com, as well, in terms of work I'm doing around speaking and breaking through limiting beliefs, the performance mindset shift, and my TED Talk and things like that. And
Awesome.
then my website, proactivate.net, if they need help finding talent that would feed into this culture.
Okay. Amazing.
Perfect. Thank you so much again. And we have one last wild question.
Yeah.
Jamie, are you in a season of accepting yourself or changing yourself?
I would say accepting myself. I love that. I love that. I think once you get to a certain age, you just acceptance becomes so much easier, right? And I'm always about a growth mindset, and yet that doesn't mean we have to just keep worrying about changing ourselves. It's just having a mindset of curiosity and learning and developing. But I would say I'm in a new stage of life. I've become an empty nester and moved to Colorado and just in the mountains where I love, and just accepting this new stage and where I am. And that's what I would say.
Amazing.
I love that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jamie. What a rich conversation.
Thank you for listening to this Wild Conversation podcast. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.